Hello. So I'm just going to start off with the one side here first. So these diodes, you just slip them through, have a 90-degree leg to them. Make sure they're flush so the keycaps don't interfere, or it doesn't interfere with the keycaps once it's finished soldering. Diodes also are directional, so kind of hard to see, but there is a line, kind of like a black mark on each side, and that indicates which direction it's facing. For the PCB here that I have from Mechwild, it has the marker here, so you know which way to point that mark. Most of the time, if you don't have the soldering pad on this side, on the front side of the PCB, um, you can angle the legs on the back out in order to keep it from falling out when you have it flipped over. But fortunately for us, all of the we have the soldering pads on this side as well as the back side. So start off with the one side here first. Have a dowel here is a little bit wobbly, but we can sort of fix that. Push down as far as we can, just straighten out those legs, pull to the side. Should be okay now. It's mainly for aesthetics, but don't really have to worry about it too much if you don't care. I just want to be a bit more close to the PCB, so just make sure you have that pushed down if you need it to be closer. Just for reference, I do have the heat turned up pretty high on my iron, um, which is why I'm able to solder as fast as I am. It might take a lot longer if you have a lower power soldering iron, if you have a cheaper soldering iron. Um, the one I have here has an adjustable heat setting, so I'm able to just kind of change to however I want it. And I generally like soldering with high heat. But for other things, like when it comes time to solder these in or the controller in, it's probably best to get a lower heat just so you don't damage any of the electrical components. Um, I still keep it somewhat high when I'm lazy. Just got to make sure you alternate, or like if you don't get a pin fast enough, then you can switch to another pin and solder that one first. Maybe another few more um, before you go back to the same pin that you took a bit too much time soldering, just so that it kind of cools down that area. Other side, same thing. Make sure they're nicely angled. Oops. This one's sticking out a little bit too much. So see I'm pulling this one out, the leg out. It keeps it nice and steady and won't pop out as much anymore. Easy. Looks good. We have 6 more. At least I think so. 6. Yeah. So we have a couple extra from this kit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Be right back. Sorry, I had to grab my 3D print off the bed. Now that I'm looking at it, this one didn't seem to have that good of a adhesion on the solder. So I'm gonna touch it up just really quickly. This one also looks kind of bad. And we're good. Let's do 6 pieces at the end here. All right. Everything looks pretty good. Some of these does have a good amount of height on them. So I might want to resolder these and push them down by hand. Like this one right here. You don't want to hold on to them too long or else they'll start to burn your hands or fingers. But you keep, pressure on them before you putting the solder in or soldering iron in. You should be able to push it down before it gets hot. This one right here. All right. There's one over here. And last one. All right, looks good. Let's flip it around. Hello? So you can kind of see, I don't know if this shows that well in the camera. It's a little bit of solder on some of them. So that helps us with the, I guess, adhesion when we go to solder these on the back here as well. But a lot of these I don't really need to resolder just because the solder has gone through and also had a good contacts on each of them, on each of the pads. But I'm going to go through and snip all of the legs and add a bit more solder to the ones that I think that may need some more. No waste. All right. Looks good. Put this over to the side first. So we have all the diodes in here now. The controller that this PCB uses, or at least this kit uses, is called the black pill. This one has a whole lot of outputs compared to something like an Arduino Pro Micro, and it's the one that actually fits in the footprint here. Not exactly sure. Looks like it uses a good amount of pins here, but doesn't use every single one of them. So I'm pretty sure this is most likely for full-size keyboards. But in any case, let's get to soldering with this. I would say to solder the actual PCB, the standoffs, or the pins for the PCB first. So you want the longer side facing out, shorter side facing, or on the controller itself. Occasionally with these pins, you get a little bit of wobble onto them. You can see a little bit there, wobble back and forth. Sometimes it's a concern when soldering, but what I like to do, so I'll try to get this here now. And, oops. And just solder one pin on the end first. Just so happens in this case, the one pin here is the 3.3 volt pin. Take a look this way to see if our pins are nicely flush and square with the PCB on this controller. Mine is slightly angled out this way. So what I would do, I would try to get pressure this way, because if we look on the plastic piece, plastic part of these pins that keeps them all together, it's supposed to sit flush against the PCB. And so when you put pressure downwards, so you pinch it this way, it tries to self-center itself when it's able to move. So do that, push it down a little bit, and just melt the solder that I had put on that first pin. I got a bit too far in. You can see that even better. Let's try to just look at it this way. So I'm going to look at it this way and center it by hand. Now that is perfectly, at least in my view, nearly perfectly square. And I think this is probably good enough for that. Alternatively, if you have the PCB sitting here, you don't have anything to hold it, you can always slot it in. You still get the chance that the pins aren't perfectly square with each other. And the two legs, if you imagine like these two pivoting, you can kind of it'll shift over this way. So that's why I like to verify it first by hand before I have it soldered completely. Um, PCB is one way to do it. It's just in case you solder it, you can't really see visually. At least you can't see it as well. Um, yeah. So let's do this side first. So now that I've soldered the one at the very end here, we're going to solder the pin at the very opposite end. And this will keep our pins in place. There we go. And just out of precaution, I generally like to go side to side, just so that the heat, once I'm finished soldering that side, has a bit of time to cool the surrounding area. PCB material isn't really good at transferring heat, but not as well as metal. But out of precaution, just because sometimes I do kind of lay my soldering iron on the one side. I hop back and forth. Oh, a little bit too much solder there. Oh. There we go. Nice. What I did there to get that glob of solder off, or at least get some of it off, was to just heat it up and essentially clean. I wanted to have a clean um, soldering iron so that some of the solder gets pulled onto the iron, um, and that decreases the amount of solder that's on the joint. This one still has a cold. This one still has a cold um, connection point. So if you don't heat up the pad enough, the solder won't properly adhere to it. So I'll have to come back and redo that. But let's go with the other side again. Let's go back to the original side. And that looks better. Right, next pin. And the next pin here. The next pin. There we go. So offset that side is done. It's fine to me. Next side. So for me, same thing. On this side, pick one side to start off, give it a little bit of solder just to hold it in place. Then visually inspect it. I think I might have gotten that perfectly first try. Probably makes sense though, because you can now stand up straight. And this side, the unsoldered side, should match the angle on the other side with the way, guess how far it's kind of tilted. I don't know. Kind of makes sense to me. Anyway, time to do the next side. So we'll do this. And same thing. I think it's actually better maybe if I start one here, one on this side, and just kind of do that. So we'll have one on the end, one in the middle, or start one that starts in the middle, going this way, and at this end will go towards the middle. All right, that side's done. Just do a quick wipe with this. We're looking good. Cool, cool. Let's keep this on the ground. So I want this to be flush. Probably should use the little grippers for that, at least for the first bit. Now that's good. We just want to check, make sure it is flush. Looks like it is. So make sure it's flush going this way. We are good. So let's solder the opposite corner, or the two opposite corners over here. Cool. And now go back to using the helping hands. And start off with soldering. Needs some cleaning on this. All right. So I didn't add enough solder for each side for most of the pins. Was a very small amount, but let's add some more. No biggie. Maybe I do need these. Nah. Looks much better. Let's go on this side too. And one last one. Nice. There we go. Looks good. Oh, I don't know if we need to snip these, but generally I would snip them. So I'm going to do that now. If you had a case for this, you would probably leave those in, but I would not like any pins to stick out. So the only ones that would stick out the most I would want would be the switches. So I like to reuse my switches, so I don't like to snip the legs off. This one, this is the only thing that this controller is going to be used for, so I don't care if it sticks with the controller. So let's snip these. Whew. These are thick, so whatever wire snips you use, just make sure they're strong enough, and also cover the cutting with your hands because these will go flying all over the place. And they will hurt a little bit, but done this many times and I got calluses on my hands for working out. So protects me a little bit when I do this. Other side. Cool. I'll have the switches that I'm going to be using for this, which are going to be chalk switches. So gonna have to finish this a bit later.